To you, Sir Ed, thanks so much for making the time to speak to us today. So you've had that plea out there, it's in the papers and we're reporting it now. What's your sense as to whether or not there will be cuts to social care and what damage could that do?
Well, Liberal Democrats have been highlighting social care because it's often forgotten. And we argue that you can't sort out the NHS unless you sort out social care. We were hearing rumours that Angela Rayner, who's in charge of the department that looks after local government, that does most of the commissioning and funding of social care, that she was having real problems. And that's alarmed us, because if councils don't get the money to invest in social care, the knock-on effect for local council taxpayers, for people who need the care, the elderly, the disabled, and then, of course, the NHS would be huge. So in Carers Week, it's Carers Week this week, where we celebrate all the work done by family carers looking after their loved ones. I think this is the week to make sure we invest in family carers and social care.
Now, this, of course, will have to be balanced against the government's other spending commitments. We've already heard that defence is going to get an uplift. The reporting is that there'll be more money going to the NHS as well. Is there a worry that social care will miss out because of those trade-offs that the government have to have? I mean, it's said that local governments have got an £8 billion shortfall, and as you point out, that's where lots of the social care provision comes from.
Well, Liberal Democrats have supported the increase in defence spending. I don't think there's a trade-off there. What we have argued is that the NHS is rightly a priority. In our general election campaign, Liberal Democrats put the NHS central, but right next to it, we put social care, because we genuinely don't think you can get the improvements in the NHS without getting the care package. Let me give you an example of why that might be. We do find that lots of people end up staying in hospital longer than needed because there's not care home places or care packages so they can go back to their own home. What does that mean? It means that a lot of money is spent just keeping them in hospital where they don't need to be. That means less people can go into hospital because a bed is taken up. And it means they don't get the care that they need back at home. So this is, in many ways, could generate savings long term for the NHS if we invest in social care. I've been arguing in a book I've written recently called Why I Care and Why Care Matters, making the case for looking after family care, for doing the social care reform, because of the benefits it can bring to the economy as well as the NHS.
So, Ed, a couple more topics to get through. So, if you wouldn't mind, just a short answer now, because we've got loads of time before the top of the hour. I want to talk to you about assisted dying. We'll have seen our reporting this morning. 1,000 doctors and other experts putting their names to a letter calling for MPs to vote against the assisted dying bill when it's back to a vote on Friday. What's your sense of how this debate has moved, and how will you be voting?
Well, I have voted against this assisted dying legislation, as I did on previous occasions. I have real concerns about the pressure on individuals that they'll put on themselves if they think they're a burden to their family. So I welcome this letter. It's a free vote. I've got many in my party who feel differently to me. And I do think we've had some good debates in Parliament. But I hope as time has gone on, as the arguments have been better exposed, that MPs will switch sides and join the side that I and many others are on. It sounds like these doctors agree with us that this legislation shouldn't go through.
So thank you for that. You will have seen from last week and towards the tail end of last week, the conversation around banning of the burka is back on the agenda because of a question put by a Reform MP. It was then talked about in an interview over the weekend by the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. Is there a conversation to be had on banning the burka, Sir Ed?
Well, first of all, I think these Reform and Conservative politicians are distracting people from the core issues of dealing with the cost of living, which is hitting millions, and things like health and care, which are the priority. And that's what we will focus in on, rather than what people should wear. I'm not sure if politicians should be passing laws on what people wear, frankly.
And Sir Ed, you will have seen that flotilla on its way to break the siege in the blockade in Gaza has been stopped by the Israelis and turned back. Those on board have been detained. How would you describe the current situation in Gaza? What word would you use? And should the UK recognise a Palestinian state?
Well, we should absolutely recognise a Palestinian state. The ceasefire calls have been long and urgent, and I think Israel, under Netanyahu, his government, is behaving outrageously. We absolutely need aid in to the Gazans who are suffering, as well as the hostages, out of course. And Liberal Democrats have called for a whole set of measures to push that forward. We've called for Israeli cabinet ministers to be sanctioned, people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who've called fact for violence against Palestinian settlers on the West Bank. We've argued for a ban on arms sales, and we've argued for humanitarian corridors under the United Nations to get aid in to those Palestinians who are starving. So the current situation is quite outrageous, and the international community has got to speak up louder and harder to force Israel to allow aid in, and also to make sure Hamas releases the hostages.
Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, thank you very much for your time this morning.